I know what you're thinking. I know you think that, man, the governments are running pretty good.
Oh, gosh.
You're thinking that the weather, occasionally, there's a little bit of rain, but hey, that's what the crops need. Other than that, it's balmy and wonderful, and isn't the weather going nice? The financial markets, there doesn't seem to be much stability, right? Everything is just constant uphill climb. Everybody's winning, folks. And if you're wondering who is responsible for all of this, well, it's the Templars, obviously.
Gosh,
it's the Templars. And one of their members, Kanye West. So, and if you're thinking, man, I'm so glad everything is going well. Today we're going to tell you the inauspicious origins of these Templars and how they've been doing really well ever since the beginning and making all the good decisions. Welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know.
Are we a conspiracy podcast now?
I hope so.
Oh my God.
I always wanted to be on one of those.
Well, now your dreams have come true, AJ.
It turns out it was really easy to get us there.
We can't prove that the Templars are not doing that.
Oh my gosh.
Did you never see the triangle on the top of the pyramid of the dollar bill? That's got an eye in it.
It's got an eye in it.
Templars, man.
Is there a thing to that?
Therefore Templars. Huh?
Why do Americans have that?
It's God. It's the all-seeing.
Is it?
I forget why.
I think that's right.
Was it a Mason thing?
No.
They're as in Templars.
Do the Templars?
Some people think that Masons, the Templars, when they died, they sort of came back as Masons. Who knows?
Like reincarnation?
No, just like the ones.
Seems like a step down
the
from
Templars
holy warrior
that
to like a bricklayer.
Yeah, exactly.
The Templars that evaded like bloody murder went underground and then became Masons. Well, they were really good at building castles. In fact, one of their castles that they built is going to be a central point of our story today.
Ooh, all right. Anyway, let me finish introducing who we are and what we're doing. Welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know. This is a podcast about the classical world, old books, old art, old stuff, old people, old ideas, and bringing those old things to you in a way that is palatable and fun. We are 3 educators at a classical school in Austin, Texas, named Veritas Academy. My name is AJ Hannenberg, and I am joined by Thomas Magby.
Hello.
And Graham Donaldson.
Hi.
And we 3 are aspiring Templars.
I was going to say, we want to control world events. Is that what we're getting at right now?
I don't have very much money. That's why. Yeah.
You can't buy your way in, is what you're saying? Okay.
I win 8 out of 10 SimCity games that I play. Okay. I feel like I'm a good fit.
You're pretty close. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mean Civilization or SimCity?
Either way.
What's this Civilization game? No, I'm kidding. I know. Yeah.
They both do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So where we left off last time, the Templars had been established. They started off as like bodyguards to the Pilgrims. And then they kind of...
Not the U.S. Pilgrims.
Not the U.S. Pilgrims. The Pilgrims to the Holy Land.
Yes.
And they somehow got around...
And Holy Land, not the U.S.
Correct. Yes, very good.
These are helpful clarifications.
Just in case you're confused.
Maybe this is our right way of saying there's a Templars Part 1 listener.
Yes, there's a Templars Part 1 you can go listen to.
You may wish to listen to first.
And a lot of people weren't super cool with taking holy vows and then also being those who were the dispensers of blood and guts, who were killers. In the East, they thought, well, this new political reality is trying to hold the Holy Land, and having these dedicated warriors is probably a good thing. We debated that last podcast.
Yeah.
So people didn't like holy warriors also being super violent?
Yeah.
So the new movie, The Popinator, is probably not going to go
Probably not going to go over super well.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm feeling feisty today.
I can feel that.
Yeah.
So then, I'm not doing it on purpose, I swear. Where I'm thinking.
Do you want me to? Can I pull up the?
No, please don't.
Our new favorite review that we received.
You have to now.
Waiting for Donaldson.
You have to.
All I remember is the title being "Waiting for Donaldson." It's going to take me a while to get there.
So, in 1147, there is this Muslim warlord named Zengi, and Zengi. Zengi.
It's not a very intimidating name.
I know. Did he become a warlord because he got a complex? Because people...
It sounds like a startup company.
Yeah.
But anyway, Zengi, he was...
Guys, remember our startup company we founded forever ago, Clowder?
Clowder.
Do you know the name for a group when you have... So one cat is called a cat. When you have multiple cats, do you know what the name of that is? It's a clowder of cats.
Oh.
That's the plural.
Really?
Yes. Yes. Anyway, so
what was our thing? Was it like
it was a cloud-based company,
cloud-based cat video company?
Sure. Now, exactly. So Clowder now makes perfect sense. Anyway, there's your fun fact for the day.
So Zengi he went and attacked the northern remember how the crusading world was divided into a bunch of different provinces. You have the Kingdom of Jerusalem, you have the County of Edessa, you've got Tripoli, and you've got, I don't know, some other ones. Okay.
Probably don't matter.
I can't remember their names.
France, whatever.
But Zengi went and he took over Edessa. He conquered it and killed the Christians who were rulers over it. And this got everybody in the Christian West real nervous because there's this warlord and he took over this county of Edessa. And in 1147, the Pope called the Second Crusade, and he had two heavyweights who were going to come. He had Louis the Seventh out of France and Conrad.
Louis and Conrad?
Zengi,
Conrad.
Yeah, Louis and Conrad III out of Germany.
Like a buddy cop movie or something?
Yeah, Louis VII and Conrad III.
Zengi, your safety's on.
But anyway, so those two were heavy hitters, and they were going to go and bring their armies from France and Germany into the Holy Land. And the crusade was called by the nerdiest pope name that I can know of. Is Pope Eugene.
Eugene. Was there a second Eugene? Or
this is Eugene III.
This is, wow, okay.
So there was two previous Eugenes. I don't know how many Eugenes came after that. But anyway, so Pope Eugene III calls the Second Crusade, and Louis VII and Conrad III go. And they get a bunch of volunteers, but a lot of their volunteers, they had tens of thousands of soldiers, but a lot of these soldiers were like zealous peasants, basically going with like sticks and t-shirts.
Like they didn't want to be a smith like their dad.
Yeah. They wanted adventure, and so they went off. But they also had a couple of thousand of Templar knights, and these Templar knights helped keep the troops in line. They helped them sort of organize, and as they were going from France and Germany to Edessa, which is in the north, it's sort of I guess if you would cross over Turkey, and as you were swinging down, it would be sort of modern day Syria. As they were going to Edessa, the Templars sort of helped organize them and train them at least a little bit. And they were going up against Zengi, but at some point along the way, Louis VII and Conrad III got lost. They got separated, and the French went one way and the Germans went the other way, and they couldn't find each other. And they...
Zut.
Yeah, exactly. Not a happy day. And then Zengi sort of realized this and had the two armies separated, and he destroyed both of them very easily. So the Second Crusade...
Okay.
They had the Islamic warriors. They had these amazing mounted archers. They could ride their horses without hands. They could steer their horses perfectly just with their thighs and feet, and they could shoot their bows and arrows, at a gallop. And so you had these, French dudes in t-shirts chasing after horses, and these horses basically circling around them and picking them off. It was very bad.
That sounds brutal.
It was not.
So this whole thing failed because they didn't have Google Maps?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. They didn't have Google Maps. They got lost, and then Conrad got rocked, and then Louis VII got rocked at a separate time, and the whole thing was a giant failure. And there was rumors that maybe this happened because the Eastern Christians in Constantinople betrayed the Western Christians it was basically they got rocked so hard that the pious West was like, there's no way they could have been destroyed without sort of treachery.
Oh,
yeah.
But actually
they
probably just
got lost.
Yeah, they got lost, and then they got...
Well, I mean, it's possible that somebody was treacherously leading them astray.
It's true. We'll never know. But the Second Crusade was an absolute failure. But it did highlight the fact that Templars were very useful and needed for this thing. So, and then this kind of solidified in the people's minds that Templar Knights equal Crusaders. They were with Louis VII and Conrad III, and they were training people, and they were going off, and they raised a whole ton of money before this whole thing happened. So now in people's minds, Templars were Crusaders in their minds.
That's what I think of too. I guess this was part one, but I was most surprised to hear that they started off protecting people on pilgrimages.
Yeah, the First Crusade had already happened, and there were no Templars.
Right.
And so now, this Zengi guy took control of the north, and he had the county of Edessa, and people were a little nervous. Okay. Then you had a new king of Jerusalem, about 15 years later, and his name was King Amalric. Now, King Amalric is going to be a big player. Unfortunately, King Amalric is not a very attractive figure to history. Let me sort of explain. Here's one way that he was described from Dan Jones' wonderful book, The Templars. This is King Amalric. King Amalric of Jerusalem was a struggler. He spoke with a stammer, which made eloquent conversation a chore. He ate sparingly, yet still grew so fat that his blubbery pectorals hung down to his waist like an old woman's pendulous breasts. He found it hard to charm his courtiers, who thought him taciturn and devoid of small talk, and consistently lost his pious battle to resist the sin of fornication, sharing his bed with married and unmarried women alike. So, not a noble or honorable man. So a stammerer, kind of overweight.
But at least he can turn that into getting the ladies, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
There's got to be some...
That makes it okay.
There's got to be some sort of
silver
charm
lining
there, right?
in every blubbery cloud. All right. Poor guy.
Clean.
But anyway, and he was not a very noble person. But he was king and crowned in 1163 when he was 27. His brother Baldwin III was dead and had fever and dysentery that wore him out. And there was rumor that maybe King Amalric killed his brother Baldwin III because when Baldwin was really sick, there was this doctor who came and he's like, what you should do is you should take this. And he gave him this little...
Sorry, it was Dr. Dracula?
Yeah.
To help him
Blah.
out? Thank you, good.
I don't know. This doctor came and he gave him this medicine, and the king took it and promptly died.
Right.
And
so it was Dracula.
So people were a little concerned, so they took a little leftover, and then King Amalric was like, oh, he's dead, now I'm king. And one of the old loyal servants to Baldwin III took the medicine and was like, I wonder, and mixed it with some bread and fed it to his dog, and his dog promptly died. So there was rumors that King Amalric killed his brother to be king, but whatever. Nevertheless, he is now
king. But if you called him on it, he said, I didn't kill my brother.
I didn't kill my brother.
The poison
the medicine
killed my brother.
And... So we had King Amalric, king of Jerusalem, and around this time there was a new warlord on the scene, and his name was Nur al-Din. And Nur al-Din had Aleppo, he had Mosul, and he had Damascus. So he was one of these. So remember, the Islamic world at this point was separated kind of into the northern part and the southern part. The southern part was the Fatimid Empire in Egypt. And at this point, they were very lavish and very wealthy and very fat and passive. And then you had the more sort of eastern and northern caliphates. And this was, the head of their caliphate was in Baghdad. And, oh gosh, I always forget. I'm pretty sure Egypt was Shiite and the Baghdad caliphate was Sunni. I'm pretty sure... I'm not 100%. I don't want to insult any historians out there, but I'm pretty sure that's right. And anyway, Nur al-Din had united all of Syria. He had Aleppo, he had Mosul, he had Damascus. He had sort of united all of these roving bands together under his banner, and he had a dream, and his dream was that he wanted to conquer Egypt. He wanted to unite the entire Muslim world under one banner, and Egypt was weak. And he decided he was going to take it. So it was pretty much understood that the main job of every king of Jerusalem was to make sure that this never happened. Remember from the last podcast, the only way that the Christians could ever have a foothold in the Levant, in the Outream region, was when all the Muslims warlords were fighting each other. If ever they got together and were united, it was 20-1 odds. There was no chance that any outsider could gain traction in the land. They would be completely decimated.
So the job of the Christian king was to sow dissent?
Yeah. It was kind of to try to pit them against each other. If you allied with one, you allied with the weaker one to buff him so that the stronger one couldn't take him over, and then renege on your alliance when he gets too strong. And so it was just this wildly complicated political time. So King Amalric, his job was that he was going to go and unite with the Fatimid Empire in Egypt to make sure that Nur al-Din didn't take over the entire Muslim world. So let's talk a little bit about the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt. They were, throughout history, you see this in all these various different civilizations where you always have like the god emperor who doesn't do anything, like doesn't have the job or doesn't work or doesn't control armies. He sort of like think of this. You had this in Japan. You've had this in Egypt, and then in the Fatimid Caliphate, you have this emperor whose job it is basically to be the emperor, and everybody worships him, or everybody considers him to be the head of state. But he doesn't really have any practical outworkings in the polis and the civilization.
You got to delegate.
And so the current caliph in Egypt was one of these guys. Apparently he was very young, he was very handsome, and he enjoyed his pleasure, and he enjoyed not having to do work. Duh.
Reasonable for a teenager god king.
Yeah. And so then all of this, you think of the pharaohs, right? Like this is, I've often wondered at like how that political unification happens. Like you see that even with like Louis. You see that with like Louis the 16th in France a little bit, or maybe more Louis the 14th. Just the idea that you have this complete, almost like figurehead, and then the real power is given to these sort of consuls or these workers, but everybody sort of believes that the emperor. Anyway, I've always found that fascinating.
Did you get that from like Divine Right of Kings? Like if you tie in.
Yeah, but even in the Divine Right of Kings, you have a lot of the kings sort of making decisions and doing things. But these are ones where
they don't do anything.
Yeah, I remember, and I could be totally wrong about this, but similar things happening with like the emperor in Japan. You had sort of the supreme military commander that did all of the decisions, and you kind of had the emperor who you would have to go to for really big decisions, and he'd be like, "Yeah, sounds good to me. Thumbs up, go for it."
It was more like a figurehead.
Yeah. But anyway, how human beings sort of have like organized themselves to have powerful yet non-functional figureheads is really interesting to me. Anyway, so this is what they had in the caliphate in Egypt, the Fatima Caliphate, and Nur al-Din had his targets set on Egypt. So King Amalric decided that he was going to go down and was going to not let this happen. The head of the Templars at this time, who was it? I'm pretty sure the head of the Templars at this time was a guy by the name of Bertrand de Blanquefort.
It's a strong name.
Yes.
It's a strong name.
So Bertrand de Blanquefort, or of the White Fort, is what it translates to, had at one time been a prisoner of Nur al-Din. During one of the Templar defeats, they take prisoners, and they usually kill the like peasant Templars, like the lower, the non-noble, and then they would take the noble Templars and
sell them.
Yeah. Or just keep them as prisoners. Exactly. Yeah. Sell them as ransom.
So, you can't ransom peasants for much, but you can sure ransom some nobles.
So Bertrand of Blanquefort was a prisoner of Nur al-Din, and he is now the head of the Templars, and he was with Amalric to go and to try to figure out how to keep Egypt in line. So Amalric went to Egypt in 1164 to sort of talk to Egypt. Basically what they were doing was they would go and they would surround a town with all of their troops, and the Egyptian Fatimid realized that they couldn't fight the Templar, the Crusaders, and defend against Nur al-Din. So what would happen would be you would go and you'd be like, we're going to take your town, and then they send a little dude from Cairo, and he'd be like, please don't take our town, we will give you a big bucket of gold to leave us alone. And they'd be like, sweet. And then you come back 2 years later and get more buckets of gold. Right? So this is what they would do all the time. And this was how you could keep Egypt weak. You keep getting their buckets of gold. And also, you could take the town if you wanted to. But if you didn't take the town and got their gold, then basically you sort of harangue them.
You're richer and you don't risk a war.
Exactly.
You're richer, they're weaker.
And then you've got money and you can deploy that against Nur al-Din. Anyway, unfortunately, for as soon as the Crusaders went south into Egypt, Nur al-Din was like, sweet, I'm attacking the north. And he attacked the north and took Antioch.
Oh, wow.
And Antioch, he attacked Antioch. So you can't do both at once. You can't go on an offensive and then defend against the Muslim invaders in the north. So poor Amalric needed to learn his lessons. But as the Fatimid Empire got more lavish and more sort of crumbling from the inside. They got more decadent. They would offer like crazy amounts of gold that everyone knew they were never going to get. At one point, they offered 3,750 pounds of gold in order to not take over a specific town. And Amalric was like, yes, awesome. I would like 4,000 pounds of gold. Thank you very much.
Even though he was never actually going to get it?
Yeah. Oh, he was never going to get it, but Amalric basically assumed he was going to get something.
Right.
So anyway,
that's some really impressive looking contracts.
Exactly. Oh yeah. Now there was there are these two men that we need to keep in mind in this story. There was, remember, the Caliph in Egypt is not actually doing this work. He has a sort of head of the government, and that guy's name was either Shawar or Shaywar. Let's call him Shaywar.
Okay.
So Shaywar was the head of the Fatimid Caliphate, functionally, and Nur al-Din had sent down one of his dudes with an army to sort of harangue the Fatimid Caliphate, and that guy's name was Shurka. So we have Shawar and Shurka. And Shurka
he did never shirka his duty.
He did not. He was a very dutiful person. And Shurka is going to be very important because he is going to have some very important children or family members. Anyway, so Shaywar, it's essentially now Shaywar versus Shurka. It was never really a hot war. Like they never went into battle and slaughtered each other, but there was always this kind of understanding that if Nur al-Din got his way, he wanted Shurka to be he wanted Shurka to be the guy that was in charge, not Shaywar. So if you,
I'm having a little trouble tracking. So have the Christians lost Israel yet, or lost Jerusalem?
No, Christians are headquartered in Jerusalem.
Okay, Christians are headquartered, and the Nur al-Din is trying to head down and
trying to get some money, isn't he?
Also get money from
Nur al-Din wants to take over Egypt.
Right.
Okay, and the Christian, they were trying to sort of keep Egypt weak and
That's
trying
right.
to get Egypt on their
keep
side.
Egypt weak, but also harangue Egypt a little bit, and basically try to make sure that they would never unify with Nur al-Din. Nur al-Din's two tactics were to be like open war against Egypt. He doesn't really want to do that, but the better idea would be to put Shurka, if he could get Shurka to have Shaywar's job. Then you have a loyal person who's now the head of Egypt.
And Shurka wasn't Egyptian.
And Shurka was not Egyptian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no.
How do you do that without war?
If you could sort of like convince the Caliph, if at some point you could be like, hey, Caliph, you get to keep your palaces, you get to drink your rose water, you can do all the falconry you want. How about we just take out Shaywar and put in Shurka? Oh, and by the way, your Shiites are now Sunnis. And so the idea, some of the caliphs were fine with that. They didn't want to lose their power and prestige, and they wanted to keep their cushy life. But, so there's these political maneuverings in order to do this. But if he had to do an open throwdown war, he would.
Got it.
So Amalric went back to Jerusalem super stoked because he has got like 4,000 pounds of gold coming his way, rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And then lo and behold, a year goes by, and guess what hasn't arrived?
Gold.
Yeah, 4,000 pounds of gold hasn't arrived yet from Egypt. So
they were only a few pounds short.
Yeah.
And he's a stickler for
no, I don't think they got any gold
contracts. Oh, really?
So Amalric was pretty ticked. And so what he did was he decided to send a delegate from the Templars named Geoffrey Fulcher.
These names today.
I know.
Okay.
They're all
I feel like
French.
Geoffrey Fulcher is a kid that goes to our school.
I feel like we have a...
Fulcher! Tuck in your shirt.
Anyway, so they decided to send Geoffrey Fulcher to talk to Shaywar and the Caliph. Now, Geoffrey Fulcher had spent time in the Caliphate before and was pretty familiar with the Caliphate. But he went down and he demanded to speak to the God Emperor Caliphate himself, and everybody was pretty... was like, you can't just do that. But he decided he wanted to go and do it. So so Geoffrey took his buddy Hugh with him, and they went down to get the gold from the Caliph. Okay. Basically say like, hey man, you gave a deal. If you don't hold up your end of the bargain, like, we're gonna go invade your country again.
So two things. In what world do you like wake up one morning and you're like, yes, this is a normal thing for a person to be doing, going on a mission to Egypt to retrieve 4,000 pounds of gold.
Yeah, I mean...
Like, history's crazy.
History is crazy.
That's true. The second thing is, why hasn't this been made into a film?
I know.
Jeffrey and Hugh on a mission for gold?
Hugh on a mission for gold.
That sounds great.
It's even better. So Jeff and Hugh, so here is a passage taken from a guy named William of Tyre. He was a contemporary of this time who lived in Tyre. Was not really a huge fan of the Templars, but here, this is a passage of him describing what happened with William and Hugh. And it's also, so part of it's from William of Tyre, and then the rest is sort of filled in with this book that we've been doing this from. So Geoffrey and Hugh called the splendor they had seen on their way to the inner sanctum. So the little emperor lived in an inner sanctum of temple or castle upon castle upon castle. The inner sanctum, unique and after a fashion unfamiliar to our world. To enter the palace complex, they later told William of Tyre, they were led down dark, narrow passageways, hemmed in on all sides by dozens of bodyguards armed with swords. At each doorway stood large sentries, who saluted the vizier enthusiastically as he passed. The vizier is like the little guide that's bringing the Templars to the emperor.
Like, follow me. And he's got the keys.
Exactly, that guy.
Right, that guy.
Led by the palace's chief eunuch, they walked in wonder through vast courtyards surrounded by walkways, marble columns, and sparkling fish pools where exotic birds sang strange songs. Eventually, they came to the caliph's chambers, which was hung with curtains embroidered in pearls. They watched Shewar, who is a vizier, throw himself 3 times to the floor at the base of the golden throne and kiss the handsome, sparsely bearded young man's feet, while privy counselors and eunuchs looked on from the wings. So, Shewar kissing the feet of this emperor, and the Templars are standing there erect and stern, and they don't kiss their feet. And they basically say, we had a deal, and we want you to honor your deal. And Geoffrey took off his gauntlet and put his hand forward, wanting the caliph to shake his hand.
This seems like a good way to lose your hand.
Yeah. And everybody freaked out.
Yeah, for sure.
And thought that there was going to be bloodshed. But no, the caliph got off his little languished throne, and he got off and he went down and he shook the hand of the Christian Templar man, and everyone was like, "Oh my goodness!"
Who's this? Jeff? Jeff did this?
Jeffrey.
And he never washed that hand.
Yes, that's right. So now we had a military and political pact between the Fatimids and the Christian states, and then and it's probably that caliph had probably never shook a man's hand in his life because he didn't have to. He was used to having his feet kissed.
Right.
And so then Amalric he went back with some of the gold, and Amalric said that he wasn't going to attack. He didn't get 4,000 pounds, but he said he wasn't going to attack any of their countries, and the Fatimids were not going to ally with Nur al-Din. And so sort of the balance of power was going to be maintained. All we had to do was have everybody just be cool. Just be cool, guys. Just be cool.
And everyone was not cool.
People were not cool. Isn't that the story of every war? It's just the guys, be cool, but people aren't cool.
Yes. Amalric decided not to be cool. Amalric went and attacked one of the Egyptian towns, sensing weakness, and it did not go well for him. And so Amalric was like, yeah, screw the Egyptians. We got a big bunch of money, and we're going to go attack their towns. And so then who does Shewar go to in order to help him to fight against stupid King Amalric and the Christian Templars? Nur al-Din. So Shewar goes to Nur al-Din. He's like, hey man, I know you want to conquer Egypt, and I know we're not really the best of friends, but these guys betrayed us. They shook hands with the caliph, and they betrayed us. Let's teach them a lesson. And Nur al-Din was like, that sounds awesome.
Right.
And so Nur al-Din said, hey, okay, I want you and Shirkuh to organize a meeting, just have a meeting where you organize how this whole military campaign is going to go down. Can you do that, Shewar? And Shewar was like, yeah, I can totally do that. And so then Shirkuh was like, all right, meet me at this garden tomorrow. And then Shewar shows up to the garden.
And Shewar and Shirkuh are like underlings to the head God Emperor?
Shirkuh is underlings to Nur al-Din. Shewar is underlings to the Fatimid Caliphate, the Caliph of Egypt.
Got it.
And so then Shewar shows up, and he's like, oh, man, where's Shirkuh? He's taking forever. And then a bunch of dudes come out from behind the bush and butcher Shewar. Yeah. They stab him and kill him and cut his head off. And so he's dead.
Yeah.
So they kill him in the garden, and
I like the stabbing motion you just made.
Oh yes,
I know our listeners cannot see that, but it was.
So basically, what had happened was Shurka showed up, and he had his little henchman, and he's like, "I'm gonna go for a walk around this pond, and when I come back, I want Shaywar to be dead." So Shurka went around this little walk around the pond, and then Shaywar shows up, promptly gets murdered. And then Shurka comes back and he's like, "Oh my goodness, somebody killed Shaywar." And then they go to the Caliph, the Fatimid Caliph, and basically said, he walked into the Caliph's chambers and he said, "Hey, Caliph, I'm your new vizier." And so Shurka was now the new vizier of Egypt, and Nur al-Din has now united all of the Muslim world against... united all of the Muslim world. Nur al-Din's an old dude. Eventually, Nur al-Din dies, and Shurka is kind of in control, but he's an old guy too. And when he dies, he passes on this entire united empire to his nephew, and his nephew's name was Saladin.
There we go.
So this is how Saladin gets into control of this new united empire. Now we remember Saladin because from the podcast on the Plantagenet podcast. I don't remember which one it is, but he's
the one that fights against Henry, right?
Richard I, Richard Lionheart. And we're not going to talk about Saladin and Richard Lionheart because you can go back and listen to that podcast. So today we're going to go all the way up to when Richard shows up to the Holy Land, and we'll kind of see. Maybe we'll do one more Templar and then be done with it. But anyway, so now they've got Saladin, and Saladin's rise to power ends the Fatimid Caliphate. They kind of got old and fat and decadent, and Saladin starts this new caliphate called, I think it's pronounced like the Ayyubids, Ayyubids. It was named after his dad, which is kind of nice.
That is nice.
And Saladin's a pretty good guy. So when Shurka dies, Saladin takes over the Egyptian caliphate and promptly now says, "All right, everybody, we're now Sunnis." And then sort of allies themselves with all the other caliphates that are now basically surrounding Jerusalem, surrounding Israel, what we now know as Israel, surrounding the Crusader states. So from the north in basically Turkey and Syria, the east all the way down through the Sinai Peninsula and obviously Saudi Arabia and into Egypt, you have a relatively unified Muslim caliphate, and then all of the Templars and the Crusader states in the middle of that donut.
And this spells real danger.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like if all the bees all got together ever.
All the bees, like in the world?
Yeah, we'd be in trouble.
We would be in trouble. Yeah. If every single...
You didn't mean me.
The Magby family?
Yeah,
no, we mean like the
insect. No, you guys would be fine. You'd be like, you'd be our emissary to the bees.
Naturally. Thank you. Good.
So Saladin, he was kind of a great guy. He was generous. He was pious. He was witty. He was, for his time, relatively humane. There's going to be lots of stories where he lets people go. There's going to be lots of stories where he shows great sort of magnanimity to conquered heroes. But there's also going to be some stories where he has old grudges and he throws down when he has those grudges. So it's 1169. And Saladin is now in control of this large Muslim empire surrounding the Crusader states. So while this was going on, the Templars kind of had another problem, and the Templars had been dealing with this group of people who lived in a mountain, and these guys are super cool. So they were a organization who specialized in showy public murders.
What?
And do you know what their name was?
Showy public murders.
It's where we get the
term.
Dark Knight?
Yeah, probably them. No, it's where actually we get the term. They were the assassins. Okay. They were the first assassins.
They were just called assassins.
They were called assassins. I looked into it. They were probably called assassins because they had a fondness for hashish.
Oh.
And that's why really? Hashish was where they got the term assassin. So
that's really funny.
What a life, getting ripped and killing people.
I know. So assassins' jobs...
Wake and bake and then kill.
So they lived on a mountain. And they lived on a mountain, and they had the head of the assassins, and he was called the Old Man of the Mountain, and nobody knew his name. And if you wanted somebody killed, you would write a letter and send a bag of money to the Old Man on the Mountain, and you'd say, hey, this person, in my village or whatever deserves to die. And then he would send his dope assassins.
In both senses, thank you.
In both senses of the word. He would send his assassins, and they would go off and they would do these big showy public murders, or they would, secretly murder but leave the body very publicly, displayed.
With like a legalize it carved into the chest.
Yeah, one of their tricks would be like, if it was a nobleman, they would dress up as a peasant, and they'd be like, my lord, I have a message for you. And then the Lord would be like, what's your message? And then they'd sort of mumble something. And the Lord would be like, what did you say? And lean over on his horse. And then the assassin would get closer, and he'd have a knife in his sleeve and this is the message. And he'd jam it in their throats. Dang. So that was like a common assassin thing to do. I mean, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty, anyway, pretty terrible.
But awesome.
Yeah, okay. So the Templars had a fort that was really close to the Assassin Mountain, and the mountain was called, I can't remember the name of the mountain. I can't remember the name of the mountain, but they had this awesome castle. So the Assassins didn't really care about the Templars. In fact, the Assassins paid the Templars lots of gold every year to let them do their assassinations in peace. But every now and then, Templars and the Assassins would kind of have a skirmish. And around this time, it got kind of heated to the point where the Templars' focus were on the Assassins and not so much on Saladin. So Saladin, yes, he had controlled, he was sort of the head of this big caliphate, but he had to go and he had to meet with warlords and he had to talk to them and he had to do all this political maneuvering to get troops, to organize, to have them agree that they needed to kill the Franks. That was what they called the Christians. And not everybody was on board for this, so Saladin had to do some consolidating. So he's off doing some consolidating, and the Templars are fighting the Assassins. And there's this, so the Old Man of the Mountain, again, we didn't know who he was, sent one of the highest-ranking assassins named Abdullah as a noble messenger to come and talk to King Amalric about some sort of guidelines of where the assassins can work and the Templars leave them alone. Basically have a little bit of a parley, a little bit of a truce.
I don't think I would ever let an emissary from the assassins come into my house.
But if they said they weren't going to stab you,
seems legit.
Yeah, if they said they weren't going to stab you, you kind of have to agree with them.
And I at this point, I'm imagining they all talk like total bros. Bro, totally not.
Yeah, remember, they love the hashish, so they're kind of chilled out when they need to be. So Abdullah goes and they negotiate peace and they negotiate terms and how everybody can work. And then when Abdullah is leaving, this one Templar, filled with righteous indignation, his name was Walter Mesmil, I think his last name was, or his place was. I can't remember. All I remember is he had one eye. He was an old grizzly Templar with one eye, and he was so ticked that the assassins were getting these terms of peace that he rode out and killed Abdullah in the desert.
Oh, wow.
And the assassins were mad, and they have the assassins mad at you, and that was a whole thing.
Right. The wrong people.
Yeah, it's the wrong group.
Oh,
the
Templars are idiots.
I mean, they named the profession after these guys, right?
Anyway,
so they don't suck at the job.
Anyway, so the king was super ticked, and he went to the head of the Templar order, whose name was Odo.
Odo. Oh no.
Yeah. So Odo was the head of the Templars, and no, it's not the same Odo from Deep Space Nine. Do you ever watch Deep Space Nine? Star Trek Deep Space Nine?
How can you be sure?
That they're not. Yeah, exactly. How could you be sure that they're the same? Oh, because our Odo hasn't. I don't want to spoil it.
Okay, no spoilers.
So he was like Odo of. They all have the French names. Odo of some place or other. Anyway, Odo. So the king's like, dude, get your Templars in line. Bring Walter to justice. And Odo was like, this is an internal Templar matter.
Okay.
And so the reason I'm telling this story is just because the Templars were really useful for the politicians of the day, but whenever they did something dumb like this, they would always say, hey, this is an internal matter. We're going to deal with it as an order. We're going to deal with it as brothers. And remember, we're exempt from the laws of the land, and the Pope can't tell us what to do. So, every king was like, you're technically right. But, this just sort of highlights that the Templars are a useful tool, but they definitely have carved out some immunities for themselves. So when one of your dudes goes and kills the peaceful emissary of the assassins, enraging the old man of the mountain, you just got to eat it. There's nothing you can do as King Amalric. You can't go to the King of the Mountain and say, hey, look, we put Walter to justice, because Odo won't let you. So the church was kind of concerned about this, and they actually, the Third Lateran Council in 1179 part of it was, hey, we should probably curb the Templars' rights, and it didn't really work very well. But the church was a little nervous about this, that the Templars were carving out too much political power for themselves. Anyway, then there was the first showdown between Saladin and the Christian Franks of the Holy Land. And so this was between the Templars, the Hospitallers, who didn't start off as a military order, but they kind of got roped into being a military order, seeing how good the Templars did. And then when the Templars disappeared, they go back to being a non-military order. And we talked about last podcast how they still exist. And so the reason why Saladin decided to attack the Christians is that King Amalric dies. Old man, he dies, and his son becomes king, and his son's like 12, and his son is Baldwin IV, and unfortunately for poor Baldwin IV, he's a leper. So he's very sick. He has leprosy. He loses an arm with leprosy. And so you have this... you have this sort of weak king, so Saladin was like, hot dang, I'm going in. Right. And they have this big battle against the Templars at the field of battle is called Montgisard. And Saladin comes in, he's got he's got numerical superiority, but against all odds, the Templars and the Hospitallers win. They come in with their banners, they come in with the fragment of the true cross, and they're waving it around. And they do this noble charge against Saladin's forces, and they end up winning. It's this huge sort of black eye for Saladin. He came in with numerical superiority, and he gets beaten by the Templars. And of course, the Templars are like, God's on our side. Right. And the whole thing, and Saladin is ticked. So he retreats, and Saladin lost a number of his personal guards. His personal guards were called the Mamluks, and the Mamluks were stolen slave children from basically Mongolia, the Asian steppe.
How does this story keep getting cooler?
I know. Yeah. So
you just keep on mentioning rad things.
So so the Mamluks are trained warriors that were, they were slave children taken from Mongolia, and they wear armor, and then they wrap themselves in yellow silk when they fight.
Frankly, that's terrifying.
Yeah, they're super cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Anyway, but a lot of them died to the Templars. So the Mamluks think of them as who
are a bunch of dopey peasants in white frocks.
Yeah, no, but then there was the big sort of nobles who could throw down. But the Mamluks were kind of the Muslim version of this holy warrior. Everything was trained for war, and so they were kind of the natural counterparts of the Templars. And so when they fought, it was super rad. It was just epic. Anyway, in this one, the Templars ended up winning. And these Mamluks are expensive. They spent their whole life being trained. Saladin's super cheesed that he lost a bunch of his personal guard, and he goes back to sort of lick his wounds. And now the Christian nation is kind of, they're okay military-wise, but they've got this leper king. So they have to figure out what they're going to do. So they decide to do two things. The first thing they do is they build a sweet new castle. So because they've got Saladin on the ropes, and they go and they build this castle just north of Nazareth. No, north of Nazareth? Just north of the Sea of Galilee. They create this castle called Jacob's Ford. And it's supposed to be the place where Jacob divided his family in the Old Testament. And it was a place that was sacred to both Christians, but it was more sacred to Islam. It was a sacred place, and I can't remember the story there. But they built this castle, and that cheesed off every Muslim because they're building, a Christian fort on a sacred grounds. So Saladin claimed that he was going to destroy that fort one day. But it was really important because the fort was the central hub that would control all the flow of goods, essentially from like Morocco all the way to China. It was like this super strategic location, and it was now in Christian hands. And Saladin puts his target on that castle. He's going to destroy it. So that's the first thing they do.
Is destroy that castle.
Is to go destroy that castle. So Saladin gets his buddies together. There's a huge fight, and Odo, the head of the Templars, gets captured. So Odo gets captured, and
then they look in his cell, and all that's there is a chair.
That wasn't there before. So you have no idea what we're talking about. Odo is a shapeshifter in Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It was on
Star Trek.
You have homework to do, maybe.
I do not.
Deep Space Nine is an excellent series.
I missed out on nothing.
Cisco OP too.
Oh man, yeah, Cisco for sure OP.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm too busy reading great books and spending time with my family. I'm so sorry.
I don't know. It's pretty awesome.
Anyway,
and Odo is the well-meaning but stern chief of security officer on this space station, and he's a shapeshifter.
So like he'll turn into chairs and then like listen to criminals talk. And then he'll be like, I got you.
He'll be like, wow, flip. I thought you were a lazy boy.
So Odo gets captured, and he eventually dies in prison, so it's a pretty like ignoble end for the head of the Templars. And then Saladin digs trenches underneath the walls of Jacob's Ford, and he saps the walls. He digs trenches, and then he supports them with wooden structures. So basically now the whole wall is on underground wooden trellises, and then he sets fire to those trellises, and then all the walls collapse. And there was such a rush of hot air when all the walls collapsed that it set all the tapestries and tents on the inside of the castle on fire. And then the
and Saladin's like, nice.
Yeah, Saladin was like, this is awesome.
That really worked out.
And then all the Saracens rush in, and the Templars had a noble last stand. And then the last person to die was the guy whose job it was to protect the castle. And he threw himself with his sword blazing into the flames, hacking and slashing as he fell down a staircase into his like fiery death. And all the Saracens were like, that was dope. Yeah. But he dies.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then after that, Saladin's destroyed this castle, and there's a 2-year truce. He calls a truce so the Templars can go and they can like build up their ranks, and Saladin can go and he can build up his ranks. So the Templars now ask for help from Henry II, King of England, and Philip II, who was 15 years old, who's the King of France. And they're like, hey, do either of you want to come be King of Jerusalem? Because we've got a leper boy who's real bad, and he's going to die soon. And Henry II was like, no, I don't want to do that. And Philip's like, I'm 15. So he didn't come either. So they're like, okay.
You guys like baseball?
Yeah, exactly. So we're like, crap, what are we going to do? So now we need to be introduced to a couple of new characters. Okay. Guy, or Guy, we'll call him Guy de Lusignan. And he was married to the leper king's sister, Sibella. So Guy of Lusignan was married to Sibella. Okay. And Sibella
Isn't there a movie about this?
Maybe. Yeah. Sibella has a child from her first husband who died. And that child is, they set up that baby to be the co-king with Baldwin IV. I've had trouble saying co-king before on these podcasts.
From our Plantagenets episodes.
Yes,
right?
not cocaine.
Thank you.
Co-king.
Yes.
So now we've got a 21-year-old leper and like a 8-year-old or like a 2-year-old baby as king.
Wonderful.
And Guy of Lusignan, he was married to Sibella, and so and Guy of Lusignan there was not king of Jerusalem, but he's essentially acting like one because Baldwin can't do anything. And he hated this guy named Raymond of Tripoli. And Raymond of Tripoli was the head of the county of Tripoli in the north. And Guy and Raymond, not buddies, did not like each other. Baldwin IV, the leper king, dies. And the Templars then ask if anybody else wants to be king. And then everyone was like, no, I don't want to be king. So you have this like baby king. The Templar goes off, and the head of the Templars, after Odo, goes off and asks if somebody wants to be king, and he dies on voyage. So they elect this new Templar head, and his name is Gerard of Rochefort. And Gerard of Rochefort is by far the most headstrong and stupidest head of the Templars in maybe not all of Templar history, but the dude did not make good decisions.
Yeah.
So Gerard and Raymond. So remember, Guy and Raymond don't like each other.
Right.
Gerard and Raymond have a history. Gerard, before he was a Templar, came to the Holy Land, and Raymond was like, dude, I got a girl you should marry. And Gerard was like, that's awesome. Always wanted to marry a rich girl. And Raymond's like, I got you, buddy. And so Gerard is like waiting for this day that he's going to get married. And then he finds out that this girl got married to somebody else. And he goes to Raymond. He's like, what the heck? I was going to marry this girl. And Raymond said, yeah, but this other guy paid me a lot of money.
Okay.
So Gerard was like, I am vowing eternal revenge on you. And Raymond was like, bro.
Seems like an overreaction.
Yes. But. And then Gerard is so mad that this happens. He like gets super sick. And then he almost dies. And in his illness, he like says to God, God, if you save me from death, I will go be a Templar. And then he gets healthy and he goes and becomes a Templar. And then he's elected head of the Templars.
Wow.
So now...
all for revenge, right?
Now the head of the Templars is super ticked at Raymond. And Guy de Lusignan, married to Sibella, is also super ticked at Raymond. And so they say, you know what we should do? Oh, then the baby dies.
Wait, and who's Raymond?
Raymond is the Count of Tripoli. He's like the head of another province in the north.
Okay, so they're trying to like rally forces to come and...
Yeah, they should all be united against Saladin, but they don't like each other.
Okay.
And then the little baby
So really the roles have been reversed, right?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Then baby Baldwin V dies at 8 years old, and it's a very touching funeral, and his tomb at the Holy Sepulchre is like a little baby Jesus surrounded by dead baby birds. It's very sad. But then they're like, okay, we don't really have a king. We should do what they used to do. We should have a panel, and we should all get together and choose who's going to be king. Apparently, there was one like famous French story in like before Charlemagne where they elected a king and it went really well, and everyone was like, "This is a great idea. Let's elect a king." So Raymond and Guy, and then the head of the Templars, Gerard, get together, and they're like, "Who should be king?" And the Templar and Guy say Sibella should be queen, and Raymond like selects somebody else. So Sibella and Guy and Gerard decide that they're going to coronate Sibella before Raymond can figure out what to do. Now, there's a problem. To be coronated as king or queen of Jerusalem, you need to have 3 of the holy artifacts. The Templar has, and they're in a big old locked chest, and there's 3 separate keys. The Templar has one, the Patriarch of Jerusalem has one, and the head of the Hospitallers has the 3rd. The Patriarch and the Templar were super dope with having Sibella be queen. They're like, yeah, let's have you be queen. The Hospitaller guy was like, no, I don't really like how this is going. I don't want to do it. So apparently Gerard, the head of the Templars, went and basically harangued the head of the Hospitallers until the head of the Hospitallers gave up the key. He was so mad he threw it in the courtyard. He's like, there's your key. And he threw it out the window. And Gerard was like, thank you very much. Yeah. Took the key, unlocked the treasure, crowned Sibella, and Sibella immediately said, my king is Guy of Lusignan. So now Guy is king of Jerusalem, and Raymond's like, ah, dang. The king hates me, and the head of the Templars hates me. Right. This stinks. Raymond even goes as far as to ally with Saladin.
Wow.
So he goes to Saladin, he's like, everybody but south of me I hate. I will allow you to ride your troops through my nation. And Saladin was like, yes, awesome. I will do this.
I will take your free handout for no reason.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And then Saladin's like, Saladin then surrounded Nazareth, and he was going to take over Nazareth. And then Guy and Gerard take all the forces, and they go and they get to Saladin at Nazareth. And they sort of survey the scene. There's going to be this big battle. And all the people came up to Guy, the King Guy, and they were like, hey, man, we should probably withdraw. Like, this is a pretty bad situation. We're going to get slaughtered if we attack. And then Gerard was like, Christians don't retreat. Are you all cowards? Wow. And Guy had been called a coward before because during one of his campaigns when he was younger, he very smartly kept withdrawing, and he had ended up winning, but everyone was like, Guy's a coward, he never wants to fight. And so Gerard was like, so King Guy, are you going to be a giant coward? Are you going to be a big wuss, or are you going to charge the enemy? And Guy's like, I'm going to charge the enemy. So they charged the enemy, and it was our Christian duty to charge. And Gerard, the Hospitallers were like, this is a bad idea. We should not do this. And Gerard, the head of the Templars, basically made fun of the head of the Hospitallers. His name was Roger of Moulins. and he basically like called him a coward and laughed at him. He's like, oh, the coward doesn't want to charge. They all charged anyway. Turns out Saladin's forces was 20 times larger than the Christian forces. Yeah. It was and they were absolutely slaughtered. Right. Guy survives, the king, he escapes. Gerard, the head of the Templars, he escapes essentially by the skin of his teeth. But Roger of Moulins, who they called a coward, was killed in battle. And this was the Battle of Cresson, and it was a huge defeat to the Templars. And one chronicler said that the battle was fit to turn black hair gray. But there's one, and maybe we'll end with this since we're coming up to time. We won't get to one of the cool battle. We'll have to start with that next one. But there was this one tale of this one Templar. He was a young Templar. His name was James of Maille. Maille. He was a young guy, and he was the last Templar standing. After everybody else was killed or all the other Templars had sort of left the field of battle, he stayed standing with his sword fighting, and all of the Saracens gathered around him in this big, you remember, 20 times the people, in this big semicircle around him, and they begged him to stop fighting. They're like, we're just going to kill you, stop fighting. And James of Maille was like, no way. I'm going to fight to the death. And they're like, fine. And they fought him and they killed him. And the Saracens were so taken with James of Maille's bravery that they actually gave him like a proper burial, and they didn't desecrate his body like the Christians would desecrate the Muslim bodies. They would like baptize them after the death and be like, ha ha ha. And then the Muslims would
haha, we got you into heaven, you nerds.
Yeah, and the Muslims would scalp the Christians and then put them on banners and make the prisoners ride horses with these scalp banners.
So that seems like better mocking.
Yeah, so they would do terrible things to each other, but for James of Maille, they like respected him. Wow. And even apparently Saladin was said to have remarked that because of his white robe and white horse, he felt like he was fighting Saint George himself. Wow. And apparently James of Maille's body became a huge source of relics. You know, these things happen in the Middle Ages, like his finger bone and that kind of thing. But there was one, and this is kind of off color, so maybe if you have a child, you may want to skip ahead 30 seconds. But one person...
Wait for him to get to the dial. Okay.
So one of the relics, someone claims to have taken the nether regions of James of Maille because he was hoping that with it he could beget children who were as brave as James.
That's weird.
I don't know how you get that through customs, but
seriously. No, thank you. Yeah.
But so there you go.
That's weird.
So this was a huge defeat for the Templars, but King Guy and Gerard, the head of the Templars, went back to lick their wounds, and they're like, all right, we got to get Saladin another point. We're completely out of time. We're going to have to start the third podcast by talking about the next big showdown that they were going to have when Saladin besieges Tiberias. But I'll give you a little bit of a preview for it. When Guy and Gerard and all the Templars and Hospitallers and Christians went out to find Saladin as he was surrounding Tiberias, apparently an eagle flew over the Christian troops, and the eagle was holding a crossbow and 7 crossbow bolts that were supposed to be the 7 sins, and the eagle was crying out, "Woe to thee, O Jerusalem!" So, not a good omen.
That was the omen for the battle we just heard about?
No, the battle we're going to start the next podcast
How many dudes have to report that before you start believing it's legit? I saw this eagle carrying a crossbow and like hollering stuff. Nah, Dave.
He's like, hey, look at that eagle.
You've been hanging out with the assassins again? Yeah. You got to lay off that stuff, man.
I wonder if that's that eagle's got a crossbow. I wonder if that's a good omen or a bad omen. And the eagle's like, woe to you, O Jerusalem. It's like, that's probably a bad omen.
I thought it was like, whoa to you. Like, whoa.
Anyway, so they're riding off to attack Saladin, and this eagle is telling them that woe is in trouble for the Christians. And so we will start off next podcast with that battle.
Okay.
But are there like any, I don't know, are there any themes to these? Are there any big takeaways?
To the Templars?
Yeah.
Middle Ages were crazy.
Don't be an idiot.
I mean, yeah.
That a single small nation surrounded by all like, folks that want to take it back is hard to defend.
Yeah, totally. But it's just like a catalog of errors. Like the Templars, they had spirit. but not much else.
Right.
Real big feelings. Yeah. I can't wait to hear how their skirmish with the assassins turns out.
Poorly.
Do we get more news on that?
No, the assassins kind of fade into history after that.
As they should. Man, they just sound awesome.
They're probably still around.
They're the ones who are actually running things?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good.
With the Templars.
With the Templars. They work together.
That's what happened. They united. Okay.
That's where the Masons come from. Okay, good. Great.
They had kids who were the Masons. All right, this has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. You can check out our website at classicalstuff.net. We have all of our back episodes there. I know that some of our episodes roll off and you can't see the early ones, like 1 through 6 or so. It's when it was just me and Graham, and we were both working with some pretty sad microphones, and we had to talk cheek to cheek to get into the microphone. So if it's weird, it's weird.
It's weird,
but you can go hear our early episodes. The content's still pretty decent. And then you can tweet at us at CLSSCAL stuff. On the twits, and you can email us classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. We get lots of good emails. We got one email from a listener that said we talk a lot about bringing up Christian men and why not bringing up Christian women. I don't know that was intentional sexism on our part. I think maybe it's just because like we run male leadership classes, and so we deal with like raising the gentleman at school. And so I like, it's more awkward for me to deal specifically with female students, especially on a one-on-one mentorship context.
I'm sure in some cases when we're talking about raising Christian men, we're probably speaking out of turn and using man in the terms of mankind.
Yeah, that was my other explanation.
The other truth is that like the great
most
sort
stories and authors, right?
Well, I'm going to say most of the expectations that our school places upon the male faculty is that we have involvement in the lives of the male students, and then on the female faculty that they have more involvement. Like there's female Bible studies run by our female teachers. And so it might be
incidental, but that's not like being raised up in good education and in spirit should not be. It's not a sexist thing, right? It's available to all.
Yes, equitable. and these things that we're talking about are not solely tailored to males.
Males.
By any sense of the imagination.
Yeah. Anyway, just thought I'd, cool. So thanks for calling us out on that, faithful listener. And we do read your emails. We'll try to get back to you. And I suppose that's me and the boys signing off. Thanks for
listening.
Hanging out with us for another episode.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.